Hello everyone and welcome back to Bitwig Studio and Music Production. This is lesson 5.43, and in this lesson I'm going to show you a very simple and logical technique that you can implement to add a little bit more of an analog characteristic and feel to your sounds inside of the Polysynth. This technique has been used a lot, especially with these sort of more digital sounding analog modeled synthesizers, just to give them that little bit extra of character and imperfection that we familiarize so much with the classic analog synthesizer sound. Instead of using distortion, what we're going to use is detuning. And most classic analog synthesizers with time, whether it be wear, some slight imperfections in the actual creation process, heat, whatever, begin to become a little bit more and more detuned. And we saw that when we open up the Polysynth by default, the second oscillator isn't perfect to the first. So the pitch will be slightly out of tune to begin with, giving it that wider sound, what happens when we have phase cancellation. So here's a quick sound that I came up with. We can hear it. Okay, so that's a pretty wide, interesting sound. Now let's hear what happens when I add in this effects chain. I can even increase this mix all the way up to 100%. So what I'm hoping you're hearing is a lot more movement, a lot more subtle detune. And the way we achieve this is very, very simple. We're going to use frequency shifters, and you can really do this in any combination in order you want. There doesn't have to be much logic to it. But what I've done is I've included 3 frequency shifters here. I've split one hard left, one hard right, one down the center, and just have made a couple of variations. And by doing that, we're actually getting a bit of a detuning effect beyond what the Polysynth is capable of. The frequency shifter is very similar to the blur, and that it just ever so slightly can put stuff out of tune. And we see that with the range, with the percentage of shift, etc., etc., etc. So let's open up a new Polysynth and start this from scratch. This way you can actually hear this happening in real time. Let's start by making some kind of basic patch here. I'll load up my initialized state to begin, and let's see what we can come up with quickly. Okay, perfect. I'll just pull the filter frequency back a little bit to tame this. And I can add in the retrigger here on these oscillators so I get the waves in phase when I first hit a key, which is going to give it a little more power. So it starts with everything in perfect phase, and then immediately it starts to shift out. So we can hear that as compared to. All right, so that has a pretty nice analog sounding character to it, but we can take this in another whole dimension here. So I'm going to click on the FX, open that up, add an FX chain just so I can mix in how much I actually want. And then I'm just going to start layering in some frequency shifters. So here's our first one. And let's start this one in the center. Why not? We'll pull the mix a little bit back. We'll go all the way up first, and then we'll kind of dial it in. And let's hear what we can come up with. So you can really hear that detuning when the mix is at 50-50. I don't want that much, so I'm going to dial it back. Perfect. I like that quite a bit. We could add in LFOs here to adjust the shift amount and the range to add even more movement, but I'll leave that up to you if you guys want to take it in that direction. Let's add another one in. Let's add one more in. Now at this point, you can just adjust all of these settings to taste. And what I like to do is add a tool on here at the end and add a little bit of gain because we've lost some gain. If we take it out of mono, we'll really hear some drastic changes. Okay, so that's just a really simple trick that you can use. A lot of people use this, but I think a lot of beginner producers who aren't really aware of how analog works aren't quite sure that you could do something so simple like this to give your sound that little bit extra hint of realism, if that's what you're going for. Hope that was helpful, and you'll hear from me again in the next lesson. Take care.